The photograph I've chosen for the historic photo midterm is Tank Man by Jeff Widener. It was taken June 6, 1989, in Beijing, China. It depicts a man standing in front of a line of tanks during the Tiananmen Square protests. The man in the photo was never identified, but he's presumed dead, as Widener, right after the photo, saw him get carried away by bystanders. Widener took the photo while he worked for the Associated Press. Journalists, American journalists, European journalists were there, uh, not to cover the protests initially. They actually went to cover a visit by the Soviet Premier Gorbachev. But there were a bunch of student protests nationwide, and so the journalists quickly moved to cover that instead because they had never seen, and a protest in China had never been covered since the communist regime took over. What I think is really interesting that a lot of people don't know is that there was actually a massacre throughout the whole country. Like, the whole country had protests and the protesters were killed, but the only one that's covered, because the only one that would allow journalists in at the time, was in Beijing. And that's how we got these historic photographs of this violence and just senseless government oppression.